Hey guys, Mr. Middleton here. Today we are going to deal with operations with radicals. At the end of this video you'll be able to distribute with radicals and you'll be able to FOIL with radicals. Okay, speaking of FOIL, what operation is associated with distribution and FOIL? That operation, multiplication. Okay, that's what FOILing means. Force and distributing multiplication. Sorry guys, my handwriting will get better as we go. Alright, remember with multiplication that we can put unlike terms together. So we can multiply unlike terms together. We can't add them, but we can multiply unlike terms together. The main thing to remember is that when multiplying numbers inside the radical can only be combined with other numbers inside the radical. Okay, and numbers outside the radical can only be combined with numbers outside of the radical. Alright, so inside by inside, outside by outside, that's the rule that we had to make sure we remember. So let's go through the first problem. We have 3 times 2 minus 4 radical 5. So I distribute 3 times 2, that gives me 6. I distribute this 3 again, okay, and this is where our rule goes. 3 is outside the radical, 4 is outside the radical. So 3 times 4 gives us 12. Radical 5, there's nothing inside the radical here, so it stays as radical 5. So our final answer should be 6 minus 12 radical 5. Okay, do the same thing number 2. Okay, I have radical 5 times 2 radical 2. Now radical 5 is inside the radical, obviously. So I'm going to distribute that to the first term, and that'll give me 2 radical 10. Okay. Another way that you can think about this is 1 radical 5. So 1 times 2 is 2. Radical 5 times radical 2 is radical 10. Plus radical 5 times radical 5, which gives us radical 25. Now radical 25 will simplify to just 5. Okay? So what we have here is 2 radical 10 plus 5. Alright, going through these next ones a little quicker. Okay, so I'm going to distribute here. That'll give me 40 radical 6. Distribute here, minus 10 radical 30. Okay, I should always check to make sure this doesn't break down. 5 and 3. Okay, so no pairs there. So that's my answer, 40 radical 6 minus 10 radical 30. Alright, next problem, doing the same thing. 3 times 7 is 21. Radical 2 times radical 2 is radical 4. Okay, I'll go on. 3 times 4 is 12. Radical 2 times radical 6 is radical 12. And then I'll simplify these. Radical 4, that's 2. So what I have here is 21 times 2, which gives me 42. Simplify this. This is 4 and 3, so 2 and 2. So I have 2 radical 3. So this can be 12 times 2 radical 3, which gives me 24 radical 3. Alright? Okay, in our first 4 examples, we are multiplying a monomial, that's 1 monomial, into a binomial. What happens when we multiply a binomial into a binomial? Okay, and that's when we FOIL. Okay, now you can think of it as FOIL. If you really like the box method last chapter, you can also use the box method with these problems. So I really don't mind either way. Foiling will show with the first one, box method will show with the second one. Okay, so 8 minus 4 radical 5. Do the same thing here, which gives me 12 radical 5. Minus 6 radical 25. Notice we get radical 25 because I have radical 5 times radical 5, which gives me radical 25. Okay, so now we'll go through, we'll try to simplify what we can. Radical 25 is 5, so here we have 6 times 5, which gives us 30. So what we have is 8 minus 4 radical 5 plus 12 radical 5 minus 30. Okay, now I look for my like terms. I have positive 8 and negative 30. That gives me negative 22. I have negative 4 radical 5 and positive 12 radical 5. That gives me positive 8 radical 5. Okay, when we're multiplying, we could change inside the radical. When we're adding and subtracting, they have to be the same. Alright, if you don't like the FOIL method, or if you really like the box method, either way, we can use the box method. 7 minus radical 2. Okay, remember we're going to separate this just based off of the addition and subtraction signs. That's how we know we're going to the next term. 5 radical 2. Okay, so I have 7 minus radical 2 on the top, 4 minus 5 radical 2 on the bottom, or on the left, sorry. And then I just go through and multiply. Okay, so that gives me negative 4 radical 2 here. That'll give me negative 35 radical 2 here. And this will give me a positive, well, it gives me 5 radical 4. Radical 4 is just 2. So 5 times 2, which is 10. Okay. And so now I can go through and add my like terms. Now, before we only had like terms this way, but notice you'll just see your like terms, put them together, okay? So we have 28 and 10. When we put those together, that gives us 38. Negative 35 radical 2, negative 4 radical 2. That is negative 39 radical 2. Okay. Alright, so that's FOILing and using the box method to multiply radicals. Alright, let's do some more. Number 3 always gets tricky because you see a square and some people just want to distribute the square. Don't do that. Okay. My favorite way to think of it is just rewrite this problem. Okay. Again, I'm going to speed this up now. This is going through the same thing. Radical 6 times radical 6 is radical 36. Radical 6 times 5 radical 3 gives me 5 radical 18. And then I'll do 5 radical 3 times radical 6, which gives me 5 radical 18. And then 5 radical 3 times 5 radical 3, which gives me 25 radical 9. Okay? And so now I want to go through, simplify this. Radical 36 is 6. I could say I have 10 radical 18. Probably going to simplify that again. And 25, radical 9 is just 3. So 25 times 3, which is 75. Alright, so this radical 18, I need to try to see if I can simplify it. 9 and 2, 3 and 3, so I have 3 radical 2. So this actually is 10, I'm going to write it over here, 10 times 3 radical 2, which gives me 30 radical 2. So I have 81, 6 plus 75, plus 30 radical 2. Alright. Number 4, I'll do this with the box method just to kind of keep that pattern, just so you can see you can do these with both terms. 4 radical 10, 4 negative radical 10. Okay, that's 16. 4 radical 10. This is negative 4 radical 10. This is negative 10. Okay, that'll give us negative radical 100. Then radical 100 is 10. Okay. Add our like terms together, and what we end up getting is 6. Just 6, because we have 16 minus 10, which is 6, and then we have negative 4 radical 10 and positive 4 radical 10, which cancel each other out. Cool. Okay. Finally, and this is a little bit advanced, but it's good to be exposed to this in Algebra 1. It says, look at the problem below. Why is this not in simplest radical form? Okay. The answer is that there is a radical in the denominator. Remember, we cannot have a radical in the denominator. Okay. So to rationalize the denominator, we must multiply by the conjugate. Okay, and we'll figure out what a conjugate is in just a second. An example of a conjugate can be found in example number 4. So here we have example number 4. Right at the top here we have 4 radical 10 and 4 plus radical 10 and 4 minus radical 10. Okay, the conjugate for 4 plus radical 10 is 4 minus radical 10. Notice what happens when we multiply the conjugates together. the radical term disappears. Let's just say disappears. Doesn't necessarily disappear because that sounds like magic, but it's gone. And that's why we need to multiply the problem by the conjugate. So, for this, if we had 7 over 5 minus radical 2, I'll just do it here. I'm going to do the fancy one, but now I'm going to multiply by its conjugate, plus radical 2. 5 plus radical 2. Okay? And so what happens when I have that? In my numerator, I have 35 plus 7 radical 2. In my denominator, then I'll get 25, plus 5 radical 2, minus 5 radical 2, minus 2. So these 5 radical 2's and negative 5 radical 2's cancel out, and so I'm left with just 23. So my answer then would be 35 plus 7 radical 2 over 23. Okay? Let's try one more. Have 13 over 7 plus 2 radical 3. I'm going to set this up for you, and I want you to bring this to class, complete it for me. Okay? We need to multiply by the conjugate. Okay? The conjugate for 7 plus 2 radical 3 will be 7 minus 2 radical 3. Okay, in the numerator and the denominator. This is our fancy one. A little bit fancier than before. Okay? And so now, we'll need to make sure that we multiply the top, multiply the bottom, and then that should give us our answer. 91 minus 26 radical 3. Tell me what the denominator is and bring this into class with as your completed notes. Alright, see ya.